Hey guys, Chris here. Today I'm along the middle fork of the Feather River right behind me here, and I am in the Plumas National Forest. We are also drinking Mammoth Brewing Company Golden Trout German style ale. Doesn't that look good? Getting me ready for fishing season this spring, so. Oh! And we have a story from Colorado. So that is going to be on today's menu, so to speak. So cheers. Wow, that is delicious. Mammoth Original. Pack it in, pack it out. I like that. Absolutely. So today's story takes place in Colorado. This story was sent to me by one of our viewers. His name is Dennis. He's from Colorado. He's an outdoorsman, fly fisherman, hunter, backpacker, really experienced with the outdoors and particularly Colorado. In 2014, he was on a solo elk hunting trip about 2 hours west of Colorado Springs, west of Pikes Peak in the Pike-San Isabel National Forest. He was near Antero Junction, about 20 miles south of there, dirt road, and then he went back into the mountains in this very remote valley on another road, another 20 minutes or so, and then a 2-lane rutted road to his campsite in this remote valley. He told me there were some other people camping maybe about 5 miles as the crow flies from where he was at. He set up his camp, had dinner, and that night, the first night, he noticed there was cattle around his camp. And coyotes. He could hear coyotes growling and barking around his camp. Apparently the cattle weren't too concerned about the coyotes. They're much larger, and Dennis speculated that maybe the coyotes were hoping to catch a stray calf. So on National Forest land, they will lease out land to ranchers for their cattle, and this particular location had about a 3-mile by 3-mile square that was fenced in, barbed wire fence. He was within that. And that's why he heard coyotes outside of his tent the first 2 nights. That would change. He got up that morning and he found a herd of elk that was up on this ridge, and he said that they were catching some east light early in the morning on this east slope. 6 inches of snow, 5 to 10 degrees, really cold, and he thought this would be a great place to come back and see if he could shoot an elk. He's driving back to his camp Sunday night for sundown, and he noticed the cattle that had been around his camp were now in the middle of this valley in this formation, a circle formation with all their heads facing out, like a defensive formation. Really kind of odd. He'd never seen that before. And it wasn't because of the coyotes. He had heard the coyotes outside of his tent. The cattle weren't too concerned about it. He made a note of that. He got to camp and he noticed at his camp that it was really pretty quiet, eerily quiet, especially considering the previous 2 nights where there was a lot more noise with the cows. So for whatever reason, Dennis felt it was really important to bring the rifle into his tent with him that night. Made dinner, had a campfire, put everything out, went into his tent for the night. He's laying in his tent making plans for the next day. He's got a lantern, he's looking at some maps, trying to figure things out, and he hears behind him, to his north, this loud, not a howl, but kind of this growl huff. And this is what he told me. And I talked to him on the phone. And after this story, I'm going to play just a few minutes of our conversation. really interesting. But he hears this howl, growl, and something like that, but really loud. In fact, so loud he can feel it vibrate in his chest and shake his insides. Really frightening. Dennis knows what a mountain lion sounds like. Dennis knows what a black bear sounds like. There are no grizzly bears in Colorado. The last grizzly bear was shot in 1979 in Colorado, unfortunately. Very concerned. Couldn't identify it, but the only thing he could think of, it's got to be a black bear. Has to be. It was very clear, it was very loud, and it was definitely directed at him. Soon as he heard that, he picked up his rifle, checked the chamber, make sure there was a bullet in the chamber. Bolt action, I'm assuming it was a 30-06. Also had a handgun, .357 Magnum. Opened up the cylinder, made sure there were some bullets in the chamber, closed them, laid the rifle across his lap, laid the handgun across his chest. He said to me, if something was to rip through his tent and he had the rifle, they would probably take the rifle away from him, and then at least he would have his handgun as backup. That's what he said. Laying there for almost 20 minutes, didn't hear anything, didn't smell anything, and he assumed, after hearing something like a growl huff like that, you're going to hear some footsteps or some branches break. Something happened, and he didn't hear anything, just dead quiet for 20 minutes. And then to his left, he heard this thud from a good-sized rock, not a rock, but like a rock about that big, good-sized rock. Really startled him. Then immediately, just moments later, to his right, he hears another rock thud, about 20 feet away, maybe. He knew now for sure this was no bear. Then just moments later, to his left again, he hears this whoop sound. Whoop, whoop. Like that, something like that. Almost like it was answering. To his right, he hears another whoop sound. Whoop, whoop. And now he knew for sure there was something he did not even consider a Bigfoot. He never gave it a second thought that Bigfoot, Sasquatch could actually even exist. In all his years, hunting, backpacking, fly fishing, he never had any experiences, never heard anything, never found footprints. And this particular night, now he's in his tent and something is directing its attention directly at Dennis. It is letting Dennis know that it or they know he's in there. And he knew they were out there. It's an intimidation factor. Dennis also mentioned that he always believed that man was the apex predator in the wilderness, in the forest. If you're smart and you understand bears, mountain lions, bobcats, other predators, and you have the right firearm, you're knowledgeable, and you stay out of situations, you could, whenever you felt like it, if you had to, you could take down whatever animal, even a grizzly bear. You could take them out if you needed to. Now he suddenly felt this, we are not the apex predator, and that just freaked him out. Totally changed the game on him. He laid there in his tent and listened, just frozen with fear, couldn't even move, just paralyzed with fear. And he was thinking that if anything approaches his tent, touches the tent, he's going to open fire, knowing that it may not even kill this thing, let alone harm it, but that was the only thing he had to work with. He wanted to get to his truck, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. 30 yards away, total darkness, and he knew he had to unzip the tent, get out, gonna grab the rifle, the handgun, flashlight, get the keys out, any other personal things, phone. You can't leave. You can leave some things. You can leave your sleeping bag and your tent and a few other things, but there's certain things you got to grab. And he didn't want to go there and make multiple trips. And the idea of going into the darkness in the mountains like this at night after hearing these things, you couldn't do it. So he spent the rest of that night laying in his sleeping bag, eyes wide open, didn't even sleep at all, just listening for anything, the longest night of his life. Finally, the sun comes up. He didn't hear anything else. He unzips the tent and he grabs all of his stuff and throws it into the back of the truck as fast as he can. Didn't even look for tracks. And he left the area, came out of the mountains. He didn't tell anybody, but he did tell his father. And his father understood him and understood he's a very competent outdoorsman. He's a very good hunter. He knows his wildlife. He knows what's going on. He's a really sharp guy. And his father said, "Are you sure that's what you heard? Are you sure it wasn't something else?" And he was just checking him. And Dennis told the same story, crystal clear, didn't waver on it. And his dad said, okay, I believe you. Didn't tell anyone else for 5 years. 5 years after this event. It just changed him, he said. He said it messed him up. I'm like, wow. And I'm talking to him on the phone for like 40 minutes. He said it gave him this extreme anxiety and panic. He never went solo backpacking, solo fly fishing, hunting again since that time. He'd go with friends, but he couldn't go by himself anymore. And there was one time where he went and he was going hiking up this canyon. I believe he was going hunting with a friend on a day trip. And he had this almost overwhelming sense, maybe a flashback, but they're in this narrow canyon and he had this strong anxiety panic overtake him and he was visibly shaking. Not shaken, but like shaking, trembling. And he turned around and he had to leave. And his friend went with him. But he just said, I couldn't do it. I just got overwhelmed with this. For about 5 years after this, so 2014, 2019, he also mentioned that he's had nightmares for years, continuing nightmares. And in fact, he would wake up screaming and he would just freak his wife out. And one of the nightmares that he had that was a reoccurring nightmare, he's laying in his tent, in his nightmare, and he sees this giant hand pressing down on the tent. And there's nothing he can do about it, and it just sends this panic attack through him. Another one, very similar, he's laying in his tent, and he has this feeling of isolation and vulnerability because he's in the middle of the wilderness in this little dome tent, little fabric tent. Very similar, but this time he senses this presence of this large, upright creature, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, outside of his tent, just hovering over his tent, monitoring him, listening to him, right around his tent. And he would wake up just in terror from these nightmares. Really tough stuff. I was like, wow. Dennis always believed that man was the apex predator ultimately because of our weapons and because of our intellect. And that gave him a comfort out there. He was very comfortable in the wilderness, doing things for multiple days at a time by himself in the wilderness. Very competent outdoorsman. And now his world had changed where he no longer believed that. He no longer felt this sense of, I'm going to be safe if I play my cards right. And he knows that there's this mystery that is out there in the wild, in the wilderness, that is ultimately still unknown. And that is our story for today. Wow, quite kind of a simple story, but how it impacted Dennis is really shocking. I just really felt for him, and he's doing much better now. He's talked to people. He said it was even helpful for him to talk to me about it, and I really appreciated that. But we're going to play a few minutes of our conversation to give you an idea of what I heard.
About 20 yards to the west of my truck is a strip of trees. And these trees are a funnel. You know, the animals travel through it because to the east of them, where my truck was wide open. And the trees are only about 30 to 40 yards wide. And on the west of those trees, it's a wide open park, you know, for hundreds of yards. You know, they're huge. So animals travel through those trees because they feel safe.
Yeah, it's covered.
So exactly. You know, it's concealment, it's cover. That's just, I've seen deer and elk do that. I'm getting a chicken skin right now thinking about it. And so 10:20 that night, I'm laying there on my bag, my pad, and normally I leave my rifle in my truck. I don't like bringing it from cold to hot to cold, but for whatever reason, because of just how kind of strange it felt, I brought it in my tent with me that night. Normally I just have a pistol with me. And I remember looking at my watch when it happened. 10:20, this thing just, I can't make the noise, you know. Obviously I can't do it, but it was like when you're clearing your throat, just like that. You get a bad smell, or just like, oh, that, you know, that's nasty. But this thing just goes, oh, like that.
Yeah.
But the second, 2 seconds long. And hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I startled my wife with that noise.
Oh, yeah.
I had to tell her I was okay. So.
Yeah, the sound was really deep, is what you said.
Oh, it was. It moved my insides. I could feel it like reverberating inside of me. You know, like you ever been next to a vehicle that's just got bass, or at a concert that's just bass? Just you can feel it inside of you. That's
kind of
How
vibrating.
it felt. Yeah, you could feel the vibrations inside. It felt like my insides were jiggling around from it.
Wow.
Yeah,
and,
it was.
And you thought that was, how far away was that? About 50
yards.
50 yards?
It was in that strip of trees. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
What happened?
50 yards is quite a ways with that sound having that kind of effect on you. So
yeah, you know, and it could have been, it could have been just on the other side of my truck. I'm saying 50 yards just because that's where that strip of trees was, and in my mind, I envisioned them coming from the north through those trees and going, "Hey, what is that?" And it was like a warning sound to the others, because there was more than one. That, you know, like, hey, something's wrong. You know, or maybe they came over through the trees and got startled, and that was the first noise that they made. Something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I felt that, and I heard it, and I felt it, and I'm just laying there, just petrified. You know, and I've spent weeks at a time by myself in the mountains. It's not a problem. It never was before that. I'd backpack 3 or 4 days, hunt, throw my bag under a juniper or a pine tree or something, and, you know, that's my camp for the night.
Yeah.
And that noise I've never heard anything like it before or since. I've, there's videos and, different recordings, and there's sounds similar to it, but nothing, I haven't heard anything quite like it, recorded.
And then you said you grabbed your 357.
Yep. I had that laying next to me. So I grabbed that. At first I grabbed my rifle. I racked around into the chamber, laid that across my stomach, and then I grabbed my 357 and put that on my chest. With my left hand, I had that. With my right hand, I had my rifle. My thinking is, if something's coming, it's going to get the rifle and then the pistol.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't even want to say it was frightening. It just was. I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. It didn't. I've heard bears. I've had bears circling my tent, backpacked in. Whatever. You can hear them roaring or growling or whatever they're doing, and it's like, oh, that sucks. Go away. Yell at them, and most of the time they leave.
Yeah.
Coyotes, wolves, lion. It wasn't a lion. Lions scream. I've heard that several times. Sounds like a woman screaming.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a noise that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I'm almost 50, and I've spent my whole life in the mountains, hunting, fishing, backpacking, everything. So I'm pretty familiar with it. And I'm laying there just going, what the heck was that noise? I'm going through my brain. The only thing I can think of is a bear, but if that's a bear, it's a grizzly. And there's no grizzlies in Colorado.
No.
Not supposed to.
Nope.
That's not a black bear. Yeah, because you could just tell with how deep that sound was. It wasn't natural.
Yeah.
So then 20 minutes later, I'm laying there going, I pretty much convinced myself it's got to be a bear. It's got to be a bear.
Yeah.
Because, I'm trying to rationalize it. And where that noise came from is where my feet were pointed at. So behind me, where my head is pointing to, I heard this thump, like a rock hitting the ground. I always describe it as slapping a watermelon, just that dull thump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the ground was really wet. We'd had, I had 6 to 8 inches of snow. It melted, and it hadn't froze up yet. So it was soft. So I threw a rock. This sun was a rock.
Yeah.
I've, thrown a lot of rocks. This was a rock hitting the ground. Mm-hmm. And a couple seconds later, on the other side, that was off my left shoulder. Off to my right side, another rock hits the ground. I'm like, holy crap. This thing's throwing stuff at me.
Wow. Good size rock, too?
From the sound of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't a little, golf ball size rock. This thing was softball size, just from the sound of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
So a few seconds later, off my left shoulder, I hear this whoop. Off my right shoulder, a few seconds after that, an answering whoop. And I'm like, wow, you got to be kidding me. I've heard of it. I never gave these things any thought before. But I mean, I've seen Boggy Creek. I've seen all that. I grew up with all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I knew what that sound was. I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me.
Wow. Can't imagine.
And that was it. That was the end of it.
Yeah.
I laid there all night with my lantern on. Rifle over my, on one side, pistol on the other side, and I didn't go to sleep all night. And my plan was to get up about 4:30, break camp, get over to where the elk were coming out, because it was really cold in the mornings, so they were coming out on this east-facing open slope and sending themselves. Yeah. I didn't make it out there in time. They were not out there. Yeah. Because I didn't leave camp until, I don't know what sunup would have been, but call it 6:30, 7.
Sure.
Somewhere in there.
Fall, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
The full sun up. I mean, the sun was over the horizon before I got out of that tent. I wouldn't move. So, yeah, I mean, that's the story, and it's been difficult for me to do that on my own. I just get this anxiety, and I've gone in before and just turned around and walked out.
Wow. And this was like for a day trip, or was this for another?
Just a day trip, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's really messed me up. In 2019, I was elk hunting. The very last minutes of hunting, shooting light on the last day, and I could hear this thing walking, and I'm pretty sure it was a bull elk walking through the timber, and
yeah,
it sounded like it was antlers hitting the trees as I was walking through, but it just, I mean, I was shaking. I just took off. I didn't care.
Wow.
Yeah, it sucks.
Can you describe that feeling? Is it vulnerability, or is it terror, or what are your
It's a panic attack. The best way to describe it is it's a panic attack. I just start shaking uncontrollably, like I can't stop shaking.
Wow.
because before I always felt, there's nothing out there that can do anything to me as long as I have my rifle, I have my pistol.
Yeah.
I've got a couple friends with me. We're the apex predator. We're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But now I don't feel that because, just listening and, all these different stories that you hear, we're not the apex predator out there.
All right, you guys, thank you for watching my channel. I really appreciate it. Always appreciate the comments. Great comments from you guys. And we're going to be getting out there doing some camping for sure. Please be patient with me. I get a number of people going, why aren't you camping right now? And it's just my schedule and working full time and doing other things. It's tough, but I am going to be camping and looking forward to that. If you like stories about the strange, unexplained, and things that go bump in the night, please like and subscribe. You guys know what to do. I appreciate that. And we will see you on the next one. As always, keep hiking.